G'day Shakers and Groovers, how are you going today? This is just really a little bit of an update episode because I want to share with you the fact that I have ordered my A7iii, and I want to tell you why, because some people, you know, I talk a lot about Nikon, love my Nikons. Some people might go, what are you doing? What are you doing, boy? What's going on? Well, I am filming this piece on my A7R. Now, why in 2013 did I buy an A7R? Well, I'm glad you asked. You may or may not know that the sensor, it was rumoured, I'm not sure if it was ever confirmed, I think it was pretty much confirmed, that the sensor in the A7R was the same sensor in the Nikon D800 or D800E, of which I had. Loved that sensor, and the idea of being able to have a full frame sensor in a mirrorless body, this was the first time. This was the first time that this was possible, and to have the sensor that I knew so well and loved and thought was amazing and world-changing, fantastic. So at the time, the Australian dollar was stronger than the US dollar. It was like the Australian dollar was buying like $1.07 US. Amazing. And that meant that the camera was something like, it was I think it was 2,900 or something. So I got myself one. I was so excited. This is a camera I could always have on me. It was smaller, and I deliberately bought the 35mm 2.8, which we're shooting on right now, as well as this 55 1.8. Two beautiful lenses. They still sell them now. It cost me about $1,000. Now we're looking at about $1,500 for these lenses. That's how much our dollar has changed. It's now trading at something like 70, anywhere between low 70s and high 70s. So it's a third less valuable. Makes buying camera equipment and computers and so on much more expensive than it was a few years ago. So yeah, love this camera. Allowed me to shoot with a full frame 35mm sensor, get the same level of quality, and at the time Sony was shipping it with a free Metabones adapter to put my Nikon lenses on it. So I was going to get it all. I was going to get the world. But there was one problem. For some reason, Sony decided to compress the raw files, and I did a lot of research into this. I can't remember it all right now, but they basically were throwing away some of the data in the raw files, which in the end meant I couldn't get the same results that I got out of my D800. I was a little bit disappointed by that, so I didn't keep using this camera to do my professional work and my streetscapes, my street photography. Here's an example though of one of the shots taken with this camera. Of course, we're in aperture here, which continues to be my favorite piece of software for photo editing, using the 24 tilt shift because it had manual aperture. It was one of the few lenses that you had aperture control over, because back then the Metabones adapter gave you nothing. But there's no data comes through back with the old Metabones adapter. We couldn't get the aperture. Didn't know what mil it was. Obviously know the shutter because that's built in, and the ISO. So there's one example. So this is when I first got it, and I was experimenting and trying to make it work. Yeah, you know, you wanted to use really the lenses that you could control a bit, and then to find that the raw files weren't so good. So look, it was a great starting point for 35mm in mirrorless. Very excited. And this camera continued to be a camera that I used for social events and family occasions and so on, because it was small, it wasn't my pro gear, so I could throw it around a bit more. Great compromise. Had these two little lenses. Fantastic. Perfect. But my life has changed, and I'm doing way more movie making in 2018 than I was in 2013. And of course, as we know, Nikon would not be anybody's first choice if you want a camera to autofocus on your face. It just can't do it. And I believe that this camera, which is from 2013, is doing a better job of autofocusing on my face right now. I hope this is true, than what my brand new, well, almost new, 6-month-old Nikon D850 will do. This is set to continuous autofocus face detect. The Nikon would just keep hunting. I've tested it, the T850, whereas this does a better job. Go figure why Nikon hasn't worked that one out. I find it quite strange. So I've been in the market since I've been making movies for the last, ever since I've actually started doing this for YouTube. Coming up to 2 years really, although, let's say. So something like the last 2 years since I've started, to begin with, not really knowing how this would go, I just thought I'll use the equipment I've got. So I've used my D4, I've used my other Nikons, and they're fine when you've got an operator and they can focus for you. I've used this for the odd pieces here and there. So I've made do. I've used the DJI Osmo, which I love. It's totally underrated. Want to buy the new one because it focuses closer, but I just keep thinking they're going to update it any minute now, so I'm just waiting for the next version. I think it's a great camera. I don't know why more people don't talk about it. A shout out to Iphonedo. Man, I love you like mental. I think you're the best, and I'm glad you've done a couple of reviews on it. I don't get why there's just not more info out there about it, because DJI is such a massive company, but this thing's mostly fallen under the radar anyhow. Horse Çekala. Don't really know what that means. Maybe it's goodbye in Turkish. Should look it up. Love you, man. Filmmaking now. Need a camera that autofocuses on my face when I've got no one to look at a screen and tell me. You don't necessarily want to carry a screen all the time. Sometimes you just need to be able to run and gun in a small form factor. Minimal. And I've been waiting like 2 years for the right thing. I've looked at the, I looked very closely at the Sony 6500. I've even looked hard at the Canons, but of course Canons don't have in-body stabilization. Even so, they've probably got class-leading focus, but I really want that in-body stabilization. So, I've looked, as I said, I've looked at the Osmo Plus, DJI Osmo Plus. What else have I looked? Oh, some Micro Four Thirds, and people have recommended Micro Four Thirds and so on to me, and I'm not being a snob. After all of these years, I've always used full frame. I do really appreciate the benefits of full frame, larger photo sites, more megapixels and more depth of field. They are things that with my style of photography are actually, all three factors are super important to me. And because any new purchase I might make in this space I will actually use as a working camera for my street photography when I'm out as well, I kind of feel like it needs to be in keeping with the style of the rest of the images that I would take with, say, the D850, in the sense of a 35mm sensor versus a cropped sensor. It's a significant difference. And because these sorts of cameras I probably will be in my life for 3 to 5 years, I kind of think the difference in cost mitigated out over those 3 to 5 years becomes quite minimal per year. Like it might be something like let's do some quick maths, 2,000, something like a $400 difference per year, $1 a day, give or take. We can handle that. We can handle that for all the benefits that come with a full frame camera. So the A7iii came out, looked amazing, but just a bit too expensive, and really it's sitting in exactly the same space as the Nikon D850, which I have 2 of, and I bought them before they came out, and I have a lot of Nikon glass, so I'm staying there for my professional work. And I'm still pretty sure that some of the things like the electronic viewfinder and the ergonomics, I'm still going to prefer the Nikon. I'm very confident of that. But for vlogging, running and gunning, and social events, and you know, that in between grey stuff where you're kind of out and then you see a shot that you want and it can be the one. Doesn't matter, as long as if you see an amazing shot at any time, you should take it. The A7iii, now announced, and everybody's raving about it. It's been out for 2 months. I think there's enough evidence on the ground to say that this is a smashing camera. It's absolutely going to nail what I want to do. It'll stay focused on me when I'm vlogging. I can use it for social events. I can use it for professional work. I can use my Nikon glass on it now, and with adapters that give me everything: focus, aperture, data, and stabilization. They exist, which is very exciting, not too expensive. So you've got the best of both worlds. And after 5 years since I last invested in the Sony full-frame universe, I totally think it's time. They've done 2 more iterations since then. It's time to step in and see how good it is. I do a lot of research, like you do, into trying to find the gear that best suits my needs. And you know, that can sometimes be a long time coming, and I like to invest carefully. And I want to say something really important about that. You know, we all have a slightly different use case. So a good camera for one may not be a good camera for another. It doesn't mean that camera's a bad camera. It just means it might not fit their use case. And I think it's really important that people respect everybody's individual use case. And often someone's saying, oh, you know, I think this camera's better. They're saying for their use case. Like, you know, Canon are great cameras. And right now, if you were probably... Nah, let's not talk about that stuff. Who cares? I don't actually care. Get a Canon if you want to get a Canon. It's got its place in the world. I think they've got some catching up to do in certain places, but whatever. It's always swings and roundabouts. Can I tell you, people, in 2007, I had spent $9,000 on a Nikon D2X. This was Nikon's flagship camera. It was huge. It was like a D5 is today. Same size, same thing, but it was a cropped sensor. And Canon had had full-frame sensors out for a year or 2 or maybe 3. And I was like, oh my God, come on, Nikon. The D2X, you know, it looked absolutely crap with ISOs 800 and higher. It was terrible. It was 12 megapixels, but it just did not compete. I was invested in Nikon glass, but I can tell you, in the days and weeks that led up to the launch of the D3, I was ready to jump ship. It simply was deeply, deeply inferior to the Canons of the time. And it's just luck that Nikon announced it at the time that they did, and I hadn't pulled the trigger and changed all my glass and moved to Canon. It's only luck. So I can tell you, sometimes Canon is way ahead, sometimes Nikon is way ahead, or Nikon, and sometimes Sony. And I think Sony are really, you know, if this was a horse race, I think they're a couple of nostrils ahead of the other guys at the moment, just in the sense of innovation. But of course, we now have this announcement from Nikon that they're going to do something mirrorless. So, very exciting stuff. I can't wait. For us, the users, man, we are the luckiest people in the world. It's such an exciting time. But in the interim, in the 18 months until that comes out, and then probably another 6 months after that until we actually really know how good it is. So really, could be 2 years till we know what to think of the Nikon mirrorless, hopefully full frame. Please don't do a crop sensor. We will all cry. We will all make videos about crying. It will be a sad day for Nikon and Nikon's people. Come on, Nikon's people. Tell them we don't want anything other than a full frame mirrorless. If Sony can do it, you can do it. If there was ever an embargo between Nikon and Sony, surely it's going to be over after 7 years after the A7R. This camera right here came out. So, my interim camera is the A7iii. It's ordered. I was going to go and buy one yesterday. They didn't have any in stock. It's ordered. As soon as I've got one in my hands, I'll start telling you all about it. It's been so good to chat. I want to hear your thoughts. about the A7 III. I want to hear your thoughts about the idea of a photographer who's got their very special, very precious gear that they use for their clients, or they use for their bird watching, they use for their best stuff. Should you have a separate camera for vlogging? What do you feel about that? I think it's a solid idea. I certainly, you know, when you're running and gunning and you might bang a lens on a door frame as you're going out or whatever, you know, it's not the end of the world if there's a very slight distortion with that stuff. But if you do it with your camera, that's the image is going to end up on a billboard. We don't want to do that. Anyhow, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Please subscribe. Please share. As you know, it makes us all smarter. Please like. I think you're amazing. Keep on clicking, and I will see you in the next one. Of course, we're in Aperture here, which continues to be my favourite piece of software for photo editing. But there you can see again, this was the image I was talking about, the Sony A7R. This has been cropped a little bit by the look of it, but this is with my tilt shift lens. But there's no data comes through back with the old Metabones adapter.